My next guest is quite simply a trailblazer. A former international gymnast, she has become one of our most recognisable and revered broadcasters. Her talent for bringing an impressive knowledge and a sincere passion for sport has meant there is no one better to present the likes of Match of the Day, the Six Nations, the Invictus Games, numerous Olympics, World Cups, and Commonwealth Games to our televisions. She is also an accomplished journalist and writer with books such as The Midpoint Plan and The First Half, plus a seasoned podcaster with her series The Midpoint and The Sports Agents with Mark Chapman. She has been nominated and won countless awards, most notably winning Presenter of the Year at the 2024 Broadcast Sports Awards and an OBE for her services to sports broadcasting and charity. So it felt only fitting to invite her on just in time to celebrate International Women's Day. Gabby Logan, what an honour. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm I'd like to say I'm very well. I am in lots of ways, but I have a cold that's just come on like really quickly over the last kind of 12 hours. So huge apologies for sounding a little bit nasal. Listening to that list of things that I do there, the one thing I was doing at the weekend was the Six Nations. And yes, and I was in the rain in Rome all day long, and it got into my bones, and I was kind of shivering towards the end, and then I went to watch rugby in the cold in Manchester the following day. So I think the combination of the two, my immune system's just said enough.
Well, you're an absolute trooper. Thank you for being with us. As you know, I ask my guests three pertinent questions. Which one person, place, and treasured possession have profoundly impacted your life, and why? So, first of all, let me start by asking you, was it an easy list for you to formulate?
Fairly. It's quite hard to I'm not somebody who's particularly materialistic, and I don't kind of, things aren't as important to me, so the thing, that's probably the most trivial of my, although it relates to something else that I kind of feel passionate about. And there are so many places for various reasons I could have chosen, and then the person, probably the hardest, because there are lots of people who have given me great experiences in work, or have been a mentor, or have been somebody who's believed in me, and obviously outside of all the obvious ones, if you like, in your family and the people that you love.
Mm-hmm.
So that was probably the trickiest.
So who have you chosen and why?
So I've chosen a woman called Wendy Mandy, who is an acupuncturist, a Chinese 5-element acupuncturist, and she also does lots of other things to do with healing, and she's become a bit of a shaman as well in her later years. And I met her in 1996 when I first started at Sky Sports. She was introduced to me by an amazing guy who I could equally have chosen, a guy called Ed Percival, who was brought into Sky to help train up new presenters, and he was from the background of coaching, like coaching people, he did a lot of NLP and things like that, but he was a really wise guy, and I really loved his wisdom, his energy. And one day I'd said to him that I was looking for an acupuncturist because I'd been seeing one in Newcastle who was primarily helping me with, I'd have a breakout of acne on my chin, which was quite hormonal, and this acupuncturist was helping me. And I'd left Newcastle to come to live in London, and he said, "Oh, this woman's quite amazing." And so I went for quite superficial reasons, thinking that I needed my skin sorting out. And what Wendy did for me was probably, I wouldn't go so far as to say she changed my life, but she certainly helped me change my life and change the trajectory of how my life was going at a time which on the surface looked really great, because I was, got offered this amazing opportunity at Sky, and I was, moved to London. Everything seemed to be very good. But a few years before that, my brother had died. My parents were starting to go through a very, very challenging time in their relationship that would end in divorce. And I think I was losing my way a little bit. I'd just come out of a 3-year relationship that I'd had from university, and I wasn't really very sure of who I was, and I think a lot of that was tied up with family relationships, not quite sure what my role was going to be in all of this changing dynamics. And through her help and guidance, I feel like I was given the tools to help myself. And so
yes,
at that point in my life, I think at that age, in your early 20s, it can be quite fundamental, can't it, to your later life experiences and your relationships that you have throughout life, if you can address or at least arrest even, something that seems to be going wrong. And I think that's what she did with me. And it was very much, it felt like collaboration, she was the kind of person who asked lots of questions, and I didn't realize that it was therapy, really.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be passive, to lie down and have needles stuck inside me, and well, not stuck inside me, but stuck in me. And it was more than that. So I think when I'm looking back, as I said before, there are people who I could equally have given, that title of helping to take me towards my destiny. But I think because life is so much more than just the job that we do or the profession we choose to have, I think it's, your journey is much more than that. And I think Wendy was pretty instrumental in helping me get on a really healthy path.
What a fascinating beginning. I'm really interested to know. So as you say, you go in expecting this sort of acupuncture to clear your skin condition, and actually what happens is on a much deeper level, you, I suppose, break open in some way. And do you remember the kind of questions she would sort of pose at that time that made you sort of think on a deeper level?
I don't remember the specifics so much as the kind of conversations that would come out would be to do with my relationship with my parents and my relationship with men. I was probably in a period of not making very good choices and not necessarily being with people who would want the best for me and would bring out the best in me, and I felt, looking back, that I had to be some kind of savior in those situations, and that I was going to help them.
Yeah.
And but actually they were doing nothing for me, and I think that was probably slightly, it was becoming a pattern, and it was probably related to my experience in our family, because when my brother died I was 19 and the eldest child, and my parents were broken, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted to be a savior then. Not a savior because I didn't have a God complex or something. I just wanted to help, and I wanted to be able to fix things as much as I could, because everything seemed broken. So I think there was probably part of me, because I was a capable person as well, and together, so I felt like I, could make things okay for people. And then once you come through, and I say through loosely, those years afterwards, because obviously I wasn't completely through it all, I think you then think, I start to think, well, I've come through that. That's given me a great insight. It's given me some real perspective, and now I can, I can help other people, and I can do things, to make their lives better.
Yeah.
Including being, and when I say relationships, some of these were just very casual things, but I still was intent, it seemed, on being, giving those people more than they were giving me. And then that was recognized, by Wendy as something that probably needed to change slightly if I was going to have healthy relationships, not just romantic relationships, but other relationships in life going forward. So she would engineer those conversations to allow me to come up with the answers, but through those conversations and lying on her couch for an hour while she also did a bit of reflexology, or she mainly wait for the end to do the needles. She'd probably do 10 to 15 minutes of needles towards the end, and they were often really powerful. Certain spots she would put them in, it would be like having an electric shock sent through your body. And yeah, I got a lot out of both elements of the treatment, if you like, not just the talking, but the actual needles themselves.
I mean, such a powerful combination. But as you said, you were obviously in the hands of a great expert. And what I'm hearing is that, she's asking you the question of why we feel, as we often do in life, the need to rescue others, isn't it? It's that idea of being, when you want to solve problems, as you say, and be of the best use, it's that idea that you rush to rescue a situation that's broken. And it's often a question of you surrendering, as I've learned in therapy myself, and I'm a great advocate of it. I think it's brilliant when you find the right therapist. You get that opportunity to think, why do I do that? Why does that keep happening? And that need to rescue and solve.
Interestingly, you just triggered a kind of memory that one day, I think I'd said something which implied that I thought terrible things were always going to happen to me because of what had happened losing my brother. And she just stopped and said, and she couldn't guarantee this, but she said, your terrible thing has happened. She said, in fact, she kind of used a swear word. But I think because in my mind, I kind of was ready.
Yeah.
It was almost like a fight or flight. I was ready for terrible, bad things to happen because, because Daniel's death had come so out of the blue, such a sideswipe. There was no illness, there was no warning. And so when you're caught off guard like that, it's very, there's no good way to lose your sibling or to lose somebody you love. But when you're caught off guard in that way, your body just, and your mind and everything doesn't have any kind of idea of how to cope with that, And so I think there was probably subliminally within me that feeling that I had to kind of fortify myself because something could
Yeah.
happen, something else could come and knock me and our world and our family, out of kilter. And so she helped me to recognize that I couldn't live like that, I couldn't live the rest of my life like that. And also that might affect my capacity to really, truly love, because when you've really loved somebody and they're taken away like that, then another reaction could be to just say, well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to have that happen to me. I'm not going to have my heart broken again. I'm not going to really fall deeply into a relationship or into having that kind of level of care and commitment with somebody, that kind of feeling that you're just all in. And so I think that all those things, and the reason I chose is because, as I said before, it's not for me. It wasn't possible to just keep going, my career or whatever I was doing. It's all one. It's holistic, So while those things might have been working, my life wouldn't be working if I couldn't have honest, good relationships with people and understand, how I could look after myself in those environments, not be kind of ready for a disaster at any time.
Yeah, that's so beautifully put. Thank you. And I'm so deeply sorry for that grief and that loss. It's such a trauma, I can imagine. Of all the things that she taught you at that time, is there a practice that you still remember or use now, years later?
No, because I suppose what she was doing was helping me to shift my thought process. Understand as well that certain things in our family history, in our family, were not necessarily, I wasn't taking them forwards. I could break, links. I didn't have to take other people's, ways of doing things forwards, or, things that maybe weren't healthy practices for them. I was my own person, and I think that was a really important thing for me to realize and remember, especially when you have a famous parent, because people are telling you all the time about your parent, even though they don't necessarily know them as well as you do. And so I think that being able to be your own person, but while still having enormous love and respect and admiration for a parent, is really important. And it helped me as a parent, actually, the things that I learned then, because my kids have grown up with both their parents being reasonably well known and people coming up to us and wanting our time and energy in public and all those things, and we're their parents, so it's kind of that how to
Yeah.
and that does, I mean, there are millions more people way more famous than Kenny and I, but just being public property sometimes for people and having your own kids with you, all that kind of thing, to how to manage that and how to navigate their expectations as well, the kids, expectations of things.
What do you say to your children then? How do you shape them given your experience of that?
Well, now that they're 20, they're obviously, very much forging their own paths. But when they were little, I think they at first just didn't notice it, because the same that I would have done with my dad. You just think that everybody's your parent's friend. I thought everybody knew gosh, Dad's got so many friends. People keep coming up to him and chatting to him in the street, because he was really good at giving people time, and he never made them feel that he didn't have time for them. So therefore I assumed when I was about 5 or 6 that he knew them. And so my kids were similar to that, but then I remember my son once saying their birthday's the end of July, and for about 3 summers they'd either been at a Commonwealth Games, an Olympics, or something, watching some sport, and on their birthday. And he said, why do we always have to go to major sporting events on our birthday? I said, well, because mummy's working and she wants to see you. That's how kind of at that time. And he's like, oh, right, okay. And he didn't realise, I suppose, that not everybody was working at those things. And when I went to the Beijing Olympics, there were about 3 or 4, and I came back, and the day I after I came back, I said, right, we're going to go to Legoland. And we had to drive past Twickenham on the way down the M3, where we lived in Richmond at the time. And he looked at Twickenham and he said, there's the bird's nest, Mummy, where you've been for 3 weeks. And it's about 2 miles from our house. And I said, Ruben, I wouldn't just be 2 miles away and not come home and see you. And then I realised, he just hasn't got, they didn't really have a clue what I was doing. And as they got a bit older and people started, I suppose it was the advent of things like social media, people kind of, searching for things online. They started to get a bit more sensitive to anybody who might criticize me or things that weren't always positive. And then boys in his class, would not always be very kind. Not in a, they would just say things about me to him that he didn't like.
Sure.
And, he didn't tell me at first. And then we were down in Cornwall and he was about 12 and we were having a game. We were playing a game with another family. And it was one of those games where, where you fold, I can't remember the name of it at the time, but what's that horrible one? Something of humanity.
Oh, yes.
But it was similar to that in the sense you had to come, turn a card over and read a question. Anyway, it came out that, some horrible things that the boys had kind of searched for online. If you get, let's use our imagination and say that AI might have been involved or an early iteration of which. And I was mortified that he'd been walking around with that, and hadn't, because he's a very open kid and hadn't shared it. And I think he was more embarrassed for me, and which is also heartbreaking, that they kind of wanted to protect you. And so I tried to make them realize they didn't have to protect me and that my job was to protect them, so because that's a horrible feeling as a child, when you feel that your parents not kind of up to it on some level. I remember my dad asking me to get my mum a Mother's Day card. He was living in Vancouver because he was playing out there, and we were due to follow him a few months later. So he hadn't been home for a few months, and he said, it's Mother's Day on Sunday, and there's some money next to my bed. And it wasn't Mother's Day. It was Mother's Day in North America, but it wasn't in the UK. And I remember getting off the phone and crying my eyes out because I thought, oh my God, my dad's like, he doesn't know. And I thought he knew everything, and I think I missed him as well. And
yes,
I remember my mum kind of telling me I had to stay off school because she said, what's wrong with you? And I said, oh, I've got a bad stomach. And I didn't. I just was heartbroken for him because he felt so out of the loop. He didn't feel like he was in our family anymore because he'd been living in another country. And she made me stay off school. I was devastated because I loved school. I was going, no, I can go to school. And she went, no, I mean, it must be terrible because you're crying. And I was like, well, I'm better now. And I always remember being at home going, I don't want to be at home. But I remember that feeling so vividly, and not wanting my kids to feel they had to protect me,
Yes.
So it was a really good opportunity to chat to him about that and make him realize that, that he didn't have to be my kind of savior. He didn't have to keep things to himself.
What I'm really getting though from about Wendy is that she's given you that first insight maybe of what it means to really let go. When we're carrying this weight, aren't we? With all of our connections and our emotional ties, and how deeply and fiercely we would protect both our parents and our children. And actually, we're going to meet these points so often in life where we simply cannot walk that path for other people. And it's so hard, isn't it? Just to go, I got to just put that one down and let you fall and know that somehow we're all going to get through it. We're all going to get up, but we're all going to carry on because we do.
You're right. And in fact, I just saw something on social media the other day that was it was a very kind of crass way of saying this, but it's that thing about picking your battles in life. And I think I don't want to say this and sound like I've got the answer, but I think I'm really good at that now. And I think that's probably part of what you've just said there, and you articulated much better than I did, that actually I was able to say, that's not my job, that particular relationship, that's not my role. And I'm still experiencing that with various people in my life now, that you just have to say, I'm here if you need me, but I can't take all that burden. I can't take all that responsibility because I'm actually not doing you any good doing that. I'm not helping you. So
absolutely,
for the sake of me and my family, I'm going to have to just let you take that one on your own. And it's hard. It's hard to do that.
It is. And it's fundamentally the best example then that you can give your kids is for them to see that you're really capable in your role, but you have limits, and actually that you'll only go so far. And then you for your own preservation and self-care, you just have to say, and that's me done. I can only bear witness to this and just be here on the sidelines. What a beautiful first choice. Thank you so much to Wendy Mandy. Do you know where she is in the world now?
Yeah, she still practices, and I know people who still see her. I saw her. I went for some lunch with her and had a treatment about a year ago because I just wanted to see. She came to my wedding. We had a table at our wedding which we called the Gurus, which was Kenny's most amazing physio, and then Ed Percival and his wife, and we joked that was the Gurus table. And Kenny also used to see her when once I'd met him, and that was also really interesting, kind of meeting him while I was having treatment with her, because I think she kind of could see this was a good person through the things that I was saying, and I think she felt like, oh my gosh, my job's done.
Yeah, she wasn't wrong. And does she know that you're doing this podcast today, or that you've chosen her?
No, she doesn't. I will let her know. And I've got a really good friend, a guy called John Vincent, who started Leon. Do you know Leon,
Yes,
healthy fast food thing? John is a really good friend of mine, and John, funny enough, John's a really spiritual guy, and we were having dinner recently, and he said, some of the best people I know, Gabby, are because of you. You introduced me to Wendy, and she's introduced me to, and so he still sees Wendy, and he's very, and he talks about her in a book he's written. So I'm not kind of misplacing any trust with him. So I know she has had a profound impact on many people as well. So yeah, she's a special lady.
Well, thank you for choosing her. This is exactly the type of person that I would hope that you would bring to the forefront, and I've learned a lot. So thank you. Let's go on to your place. Where have you chosen? So somewhere that Gabby Logan always loves to visit or revisit. Where in the world is it?
You see, I could have chosen somewhere that was palm trees, a beach, beautiful blue seas, and I've chosen Newcastle, which seems this one wasn't hard at all, actually, once I got beyond holiday destinations, because I went to university in Durham, and when I was in my gap year before Durham, I met a guy who was the head of the radio station, commercial radio station in Newcastle. I could have easily chosen him as my person, actually, a guy called Giles Squire. And I told him I wanted to work in broadcasting, and he said, well, when you come to Durham, come and see me, and we'll see if there's, a role for you somewhere in the radio station, get some work experience. And all. Anyway, very long story short, after my end of my first term doing law at Durham, I was reading the news for money. I was basically doing news shifts at the weekends, and he was paying me to read the news. And through the whole 3 years of my degree, I kind of moved up from newsreader to having some kind of presenting experiences and helping, kind of fill in on the rotas, to having my own show effectively and going on the breakfast show. And so I was doing this kind of sideline, this like apprenticeship in broadcasting while I was doing my degree. So that was my first, so that radio station was in Newcastle, Metro FM. And that was my first time really that I'd kind of ever been to Newcastle, I think. I don't think, before Durham, I don't think I'd been to Newcastle before. Then I graduated and my first job was at the radio station. That first year post university, that really important year when you're getting your independence and you're learning how to live as an independent person away from your family, was all in Newcastle. And I just love the city so much. I love the people. I love what it's kind of stands for, and its unity and its history. And I'm also a massive Newcastle fan now, because at the time my dad was managing Wales and I didn't have a football club. So I started going to St. James's Park. And I think football is the lifeblood of the city. It has a real connection with everybody in the city. On a match day knows exactly what's going on. Everybody knows everything about the team. That's the kind of common language. But then I started to understand and learn more about the industry. And it's actually not dissimilar to kind of a lot of places in South Wales, because of the mining and the shipbuilding and all the industry that had such a terrible time in the decade before I was there, actually really was coming to an end. I mean, a lot of the shipyards were still in the news, the closing down of the shipyards. And I was just drawn to the work ethic, the humor, the kind of, all the values that the people of the city had. I felt a real kinship with, but also I just, there was a beauty as well of the place, that, the river, the proximity to the sea, and a kind of a gritty beauty, and I remember driving away when I got my job at Sky, packed my car up, and it was a beautiful summer's evening. And I looked back at the Tyne Bridge. I just burst into tears, and I was like, I'll never live anywhere. I was just talking to myself, going, I'll never live anywhere like that. I'll never have. And I honestly, to this day, I would if the BBC had moved the BBC Sport department up to Newcastle, not Salford, which is where we moved from London, I would have been, the first one on the train, kind of going, yep, this is great. I still have, somewhere deep inside me a feeling that one day I might end up living back in the northeast of England. I get to go there for work a lot, and I have a lot of friends and colleagues who emanate from there, and I get to experience the warm hospitality of the city quite often. So I'm not disconnected. But I think the reason I chose it, apart from all those obvious reasons I just said there, I think it launched my kind of life. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it was the place that I got myself together a little bit, because post-university, it is such a weird time, isn't it? When you're kind of practicing being an adult, and you're not quite sure what you're supposed to be, but you've got your first taste of having your own income, and but you still really need connections and family. And my boyfriend's family were amazing, and they gave me that soft launch, because I knew they were always there if I needed it. Somebody, my parents at the time, I mentioned just before, had experienced my brother's death and were going through a terrible time in their marriage and looking like it wasn't going to survive, which it didn't. And so I was on quite rocky ground in my own family. Do you know what I mean? And so I think their warmth and love and being in that place, this city that had an energy to it, actually, that I really tapped into, I feel, as you can tell, enormously fond of and proud to have been an adopted Geordie for a while.
Yeah, what an amazing choice. I can totally resonate, having had a week there. So if you were to have one day now in Newcastle, no work, no ties, how would Gabby Logan spend it from the time you woke up to the time you went to bed?
It would definitely involve going to St James's Park and having having a football match involved. So it would either be a lunchtime kickoff or an evening kickoff. That's interesting, because obviously a lot of my time up there now is working. When I do the Great North Run, I stay at the hotel, which is on the Gateshead side. So you wake up and I look at the Tyne Bridge, So it would involve a walk across the Tyne Bridge probably, and get breakfast on the quayside somewhere, and then a wander up to the Grays Monument in the middle of town, and maybe have a coffee up there, and then maybe a little trip out to, Geordies would say to me, well, that's not Newcastle. A trip out somewhere kind of like Whitley Bay, and, the beautiful coastline, because you can go 20, 30 minutes up the coast, Craster, Alnwick, all these places are just stunning. And you've got Holy Island, which sits off, the coast. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful coastline. It's very rugged, and it's cold up there, It's not as damp as the other side of the country. It's not as, wet, but it's cold. You get this biting wind come in, but it doesn't stop people, it doesn't stop them doing things. And I used to live near some woods on the west of the city. So for old time's sake, I'd probably go for a jog around the woods that I used to live in. And then I don't know what the restaurant scene's like now in Newcastle. I'm sure there's some amazing restaurants. I'd have to ring Alan Shearer and find out where I should go for dinner.
Yeah.
But it would involve lots of being outside and taking in the beauty of the buildings. And there's been a lot of development on the quayside now, a new bridge, and the Sage building, and the museum there is fantastic. So there's plenty of cultural things to visit, and always some good arts going on as well.
Amazing. Well, let's go on to your third and final question, which is your treasured item, if I may. If you were stripped of everything and you could take just one thing with you, what have you chosen?
Well, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I'm not a very materialistic person. I'm not somebody who hankers after the latest watch, or, changes my car very often, or that kind of thing. And although I'm not saying I'm, some kind of like monk, I do like nice things, and I love buying clothes for work and things like that. But I always would, people say, if the house was burning down, well, of course you grab your kids, so that's the thing that, your family. So I chose my pillow.
Brilliant.
Because I wanted it symbolizes kind of health for me, because I move around a lot. This week I'm not in a hotel until the weekend. Next week I'm in 3 different countries in 4 days. 2 of them are Scotland and Wales, but still outside of my own home, which is in England. I'm then going to Lisbon in Portugal for work, and my pillow will come with me to all of these places, because if I can get a good night's sleep, then I'm usually pretty cool on every other front. If I can do a bit of exercise, brilliant. If I can have a good night's sleep, I really value my sleep, and not the longevity, the length of it rather, although it is related to longevity. It's more the quality, So if you're in a strange bed in a hotel and maybe the curtains aren't thick enough, or there's always something that can distract you from sleep, then I feel like it will, So having my own pillow seems to be a kind of sleeping pill for me. I put my head on my own pillow and I seem to be okay. So this is only, I'd say, the last 3 years or so. This is, which could tie in with menopause. But I'm yeah, unfortunately, it means I have to take a really large suitcase with me wherever I go. People go, "You're only away for 2 nights."
I was going to say, is it a very long pillow, soft pillow, hard pillow? What kind of pillow are we talking?
It's hard. It's firm.
Okay.
I like memory foam. Yeah, it's memory foam type pillow. So yeah, it has to be quite firm. Very rarely, I mean, I'm talking 1 in 100, I go to a hotel and think, oh, they've got a good pillow. I didn't need to bring my own pillow. But it's so rare that I actually find a pillow that works. So I'm glad of my own pillow. And Kenny does the same thing. My husband does the same thing. He's very much on the old take your own pillow type vibe. And we turn up other people's homes, and I feel really rude, but I think, well, I've got my pillow, it's fine.
I agree. I did it exactly this weekend. I had my eye mask and my pillow. And you know what? I slept really, really well. So I'm with you. I mean, it's interesting you talk about sleep being the commodity that you really value the most. And I'm the same. I've hit that midpoint in life where the thing that I have learned, often the hard way, is that nothing will compromise my mental and physical well-being. That is the most important aspect to my journey right now. And sleep is right there at the top. So what else are you at this stage in your life? What else are you not prepared to compromise on? Or what do you prioritize in terms of your well-being?
It feels a little bit hypocritical saying this to you on a day when I've succumbed to a cold, because this has been about 2 years I don't think I've had a cold for, and I really value my immune system. So I try not to compromise it. And that means sleep, exercise, really good diet, lots and lots of fresh vegetables, and really clean cooking. Well, I like flavor, but I don't like heavily processed foods, and I don't hanker after those kinds of foods. And I think my body's got used to eating well. So what happens, you the more you have of something, I feel like the more you want it, right? So it takes time. I was in my early 20s when I first went to Skye, and I was living on my own in London. I ate terribly because I didn't know really how to cook, and I was on my own. So honestly, I'd eat a box of Magnum lollies on my way home from work as my dinner. I was just awful, and unsurprisingly put weight on and couldn't understand why. I'd always been this kind of slip of a thing. And then suddenly I was, I'm carrying a bit of weight here. So that I had to reevaluate in my early 20s how I was eating, started to learn how to cook. And then when I started going out with Kenny, he was an athlete, we had to eat well. And the more I did that, guess what? The better I felt. It was amazing.
Yeah,
my skin started glowing. I felt brilliant. I felt mentally a lot better. And I know this ties in with other things I've mentioned already that were going on in my life in terms of seeing somebody who was helping me. But it's almost like once you start valuing yourself in that way, then other things start to become practice, don't they? So actually going and seeing Wendy, for example, bringing it right back to her, I was giving myself the message that I valued my mental health, and I was looking after that. So therefore, why wouldn't I value my physical health by putting things in my body that were really good? And so the more you do that, the more you want that in other areas, I think. And then I'd started exercising properly, rather than, after having been a gymnast for so long, all I knew what to do, I go for a run. That's all I kind of did, because I couldn't do gymnastics as my sport, if you like.
Yeah.
And so I just did loads of running. And then I realized I needed to do other things. So I started educating myself in other ways, with my physical health. So it is about, as you say, the things that you don't compromise on when you're trying to live your best life, really, isn't it? Because I've always felt if you haven't got your health, then everything else is going to be tough. And 100%. You just want to give yourself the best chance you've got of making a go of this life. And I really value the life potential that we've all got, this amazing opportunity. And I know the world is full of terrible things, and if we want to, we could sit all day just ruminating and digesting awful news. And we seem to be living in very strange times when it comes to kind of global issues, but actually there are still lots of really great people doing really amazing things, and there's lots of positivity in the world. You've got to sometimes scratch around and look for it. And I feel like I want to be in great shape so that I can enjoy all of that and look after my health. And also there's that thing of when you're in your 50s, I'm 53 next, you start to see people becoming ill for various reasons and things. A friend of ours called it Sniper Alley at the beginning of our 50s. We're like, oh, thanks. And do you know what? Since he said that, so many of people of our age group have, had, my husband got prostate cancer. So many different things have happened that I think it's a challenging decade for your health,
Yes.
your 50s. And
Yeah.
so you just giving yourself the best chance to get through your 50s as well as you can. And some of these things are not people's faults. It doesn't matter what they're doing with their lifestyle.
Of course.
And sadly we've got increased cancer rates. Things are definitely, it's hard for people to hear, but some things are just unavoidable, and something might happen tomorrow. But I can't, all I can say is that I want to be in the best shape I can so I can fight that if it comes along, and I think that's what a lot of the health related books and well-being books that I've read on my midpoint, kind of with that hat on, because I get sent so many interesting books, it all points to being well so that, when you do have to fight something, your body can get through it. And yeah, that's what and also I want to play tennis with my grandchildren.
Love that.
I don't have them yet,
yeah.
But that's my health goal.
But the self-care and the self-love, they go hand in hand, don't they? And the more that you prioritize that at the top of the pile, the more availability you are for everything else. So I'm with you on that. Do you have room and space, given the nature of your life and how busy it is and how much you travel and how much you do? When do you find time for stillness and sort of that mental decompression?
I like to do some breathing when I can, and I was lucky enough to meet and work alongside Wim Hof when I did a program called Freeze the Fear.
Yes.
And while that was made for telly to have some really extreme things going on, and extreme ice and extreme jumping off bridges and all that stuff, the conquering fears, one of the things that I found the most powerful was the breathing. And it's something that anybody can do. It's free. What I loved about that show was that the things that he was asking us to engage with are available to everybody, no matter what your income, no matter what your background. Everybody can find cold water and everybody can breathe. And they were the two kind of pillars, if you like, that he was building, his health routine on. And breathing, even last night, because I could feel my immune system being a bit challenged by this cold that's come, and I did some breathing, just his guided breathing that he does on his app. But I've also had a lot of breathing experts kind of send me their books or come on the podcast, and learned a lot about the ways in which breathing can help. And it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Because breathing is the thing you do most naturally in the world, or you're supposed to. But actually, how many times do you stop and think about your breathing and start to kind of really belly breathe? Because our lives are so frantic and there's so much going on. It's easy to go through a day and actually not take a breath. And
truly,
and really, that to the point where you that feeling when you've been crying and you kind of slightly, and you can create that gorgeous feeling just through breathing. So that's been, I think, something that I've learned helps me turn off my mind a little bit. And reading and having a massage and all those things that are, I think reading is one of those things, when you really dive into something you're enjoying, you can turn the world off around you. So more of that, hopefully.
Do you still do the cold water?
Yeah, I still will go down to, there's a lake near us that there's a few girlfriends on a Sunday, and if I'm around on a Sunday, I try and go down. I mean, it's very much a social thing. After we've got out the water, we do spend 2 hours putting the world to rights over a cup of coffee. So that's the important part of that process. But even just a cold shower, I had a cold shower the other day, felt like I really needed it. Hit the vagus nerve on the back of the neck is the most important place. You don't have to get your head under. Wim was very kind of strict on that. He said it's not important to get your head completely under. But Kenny, my husband, will have one most days. I hear him, but he likes to let the world know he's having it, because obviously. But it is I think it's a very powerful tool, cold water. It really teaches you a lot. Yeah.
Oh, this has been absolutely wonderful. I've learned so much. And considering you're feeling so unwell, I'm even more grateful that you gave us your time today. What a trooper. So to Wendy Mandy, that brilliant acupuncturist and therapist from many, many years ago, to the city of Newcastle. What a glorious choice. And to your travel pillow. Brilliant. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've so loved having you on, Gabby. Thank you.
It's been really lovely to meet you. And thank you so much for having such a brilliant take on so many of the things that I've spoken to you about. And you've really made me think a little bit differently about them, especially Wendy. So thank you.
How inspiring was that? An absolute trooper, a true professional, Gabby Logan. If you have enjoyed this episode, please do press subscribe or follow now. It doesn't take long, it doesn't cost anything to do so, but it does make a huge difference in getting this podcast made. And if you have a friend that you know will enjoy it, pass it on. Until next time, thank you. Goodbye.